Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're going to be talking about the Ascendancy changes. As you can see, I've summarized all my thoughts. I would explain them all in depth and go through them, but before I do that, there's one thing which I think is really important to stress. Now, I'm quite lucky in the fact that I have been doing some testing. I'm not going to break any NDA stuff, but I've been sat with these Ascendancy changes for a while now, so they've really kind of marinated for me. My initial reaction when I first saw a lot of them compared to my reaction now is very different, and I think a lot of the knee-jerk that we're getting is the same thing I experienced like a week ago. So yes, most Ascendancies, if you just look at them, you're like, oh, but this has lost 50% increased damage, or this has lost like 5% more damage. When every single Ascendancy has lost roughly 50% increased damage, the overall strength of Ascendancies are the same, because when you pick an Ascendancy, you pick it compared to others, so the relative strength is roughly the same. So if you're someone who only ever plays one type of build, the main one that I've seen a lot of people complaining about is like Trickster, for example, and you're like, but they removed the 50% dot damage, it doesn't actually matter because nearly everything has lost that, so the actual relative strength of Trickster is the same. So that's something which I think is really important to think about. If you're freaking out that your build lost 50% increased damage or 10% more damage, your build will still be fine. If the reason you take an Ascendancy is 50% increased damage, then that's wrong. What makes an Ascendancy good is the utility it provides, the defense it provides. Ascendancies that lost utility, Ascendancies that lost defense, those are the nerfs you should really care about. Don't care about like a 5% damage buff or nerf here or there. It doesn't really change anything. Losing defense, losing utility, now that matters. So with that in mind, let's go through what I think are first off the biggest winners, Raider and Elementalist. Raider is the standout for me. I think Raider, you could make an argument to do any build as Raider. So the main thing they've changed is Rapid Assault just gives Onslaught, and Court's Inclusion just gives Phasing. This has 180% Onslaught effect. That's 58% attack, cast, and movement speed completely unconditionally. You can fit that into basically any build. Also, Avatar of the Veil's been buffed up to now give 20% completely all the time persistent exposure. This is really nice because you could say, but every build has access to exposure. How many times do you actually have your exposure active? This is really strong, just having it up all the time. There are also builds that sometimes don't want to hit. For example, if you're playing like a trap build or something. I actually think that like Trap and Mine Raider is actually a really solid build sessions. They really struggle with stuff like getting Onslaught. Same with Totems. I think Totems would be really good on Raider, because getting Onslaught on attack-based Totems can be a bit of a struggle. Raider is looking very good. Also, Raider is the best trade Ascendancy, because you'll be the fastest character in towns and in hideouts. Raider did really well. Elementalist, a lot changed about Elementalist. I'm not going to be going into crazy depth with it. Basically, TLDR, you can actually do Elementalist for casting now. Any kind of spellcaster, you can make Elementalist work. Things which I really like Mastermind of Discord, again, giving that additional 25% reduced resistance. Very good for dot-based builds. Ignite is looking very strong. I still think Ignite Trickster is good. One of the awkward things about Shadow is it's quite out of the way, and I always used to find it very painful routing from Shadow to Witch. So just doing Ignite-based Elementalist now and just saving a whole bunch of travel points, that's really appealing. I think that's going to be really, really good. This node, Bastion of Elements, gives you 100 damage per allocated notable passives. Jewels count as notables. I've messed around with it a little bit. You can realistically get about 25 notables, quite realistic on most builds. Obviously, some builds will have less, but if you're like planning your tree with this in mind without going stupid with it, you're looking at an absorb about 2,500. Pretty solid, just a one-pointer. The Golem path I still think is good. I will talk about golems later in the nerf section, because you'll notice that some Ascendancies come up twice. But yeah, we'll come back to this. Basically, this is already good. I really like this. Slayer, this is just like a slight buff. When it comes to the buffed column and the nerfed column, these generally aren't that big. The main things that stand out to me is Headsman, which is this one. Headsman now gives 20% more damage with hits and ailments against unique enemies. That's really interesting, getting 20% more damage with ailments. You still have the really nice Super Cull dot builds, kind of yikes when it comes to bossing. Echoes is a bossing league. 20% Cull is looking really, really good. I think Slayer might actually be a really solid bleed Ascendancy because of Headspin now. You get the take reflected physical damage, which is just nice. You get 10% more damage, that's generic, that will scale your bleed. You get Headspin, which gives you bleed stuff. If you need AoE, if you're doing like Earthquake, stuff like that, you could take Impact. You could go for Martial Form, so you can get some Frenzy, which is generic damage scaling, get some Endurance Charges stuff. You could take Brutal Fervor for just some passive damage reduction, because even if you're playing a bleed-based build, this just gives you reduced damage taken while leeching, and it will give you some passive regen. I actually think bleed-based Slayer will be really solid, and you could just use Hemophilia Gloves if you still want the bleed pop-pop explosions. Slayer, bleed, look out for it. Champion. Right, Champion's going to come up again later. But I actually think that Support, Totem, and Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain Champion has been buffed. Support Champion used to be a really big thing. You'd play Curse on hit Support Champions. The main reason why I say it got buffed is they've given quite a lot of love to Conqueror, which is the whole taunt line. Basically, you get more damage reduction through Conqueror and through Worthy Foe. And if you didn't know, totems count as you. So if you're playing a totem champion, the totems taunt. So enemies taunted by you deal 10% less damage against other targets. The totem taunted, and then their target is 10% less damage to the player. Actually really, really strong. They've also put Fortify Effect on these small nodes, which is why I think stuff like Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain has been buffed. Fortify Effect is much stronger than attack damage. They did lower the armor and evasion on this, which sucks, but it's made up for by the Fortify effect. So yeah, I actually think that Champion, not Impale Champion, we'll get back to later. Champion's looking really... Saboteur, Trap Sab, specifically. Shout out to Rory. You're not watching this, but if you are watching, shout out, and you know why I'm shouting out. Appreciate you, dude. I think Trap Sab is actually buffed. Well, we'll get to it. So there's been a lot of stuff. Yes, a lot of generic increased damage has gone, as has from nearly every Ascendancy we've looked at. The main things they've done is Pyromaniac. It used to be immune to Ignite Shock, 1% of life per mine or trap triggered up to 10, and then reduced mana cost for traps and mines. The mana cost has been moved onto Perfect Crime, and it's actually been buffed from 20% to 25%. Perfect Crime's also gained 5% more chance of traps to trigger, which is effectively 5% more damage. Born in the Shadows now has guaranteed blind on hit and nearby enemies blinded, and it still has the blind reduction. Really good for something like ball lightning mines or lightning traps, which just covers the entire screen, like crazy off-screening. Having that guaranteed blind against stuff far away is actually a really nice survivability boost. This also means you're going to be having that 10% regen more consistently, which has been very, very nice. Perfect Crime is definitely buffed. They've kind of... This is where I say, like, some traps might feel like they're losing out on damage. So Explosive Expert used to give a bunch of AoE and damage reduction. They removed the AoE damage reduction, and they've moved all the AoE onto Chain Reaction. So Chain Reaction is now like the go-to. I think you would take this over Explosive Expert for Fire Trap and Flamethrower Trap, because this now gives the 50% increased cooldown recovery for throwing traps. So this is the cooldown traps. Lightning Splash Trap is terrible in my opinion. They over-nerfed it. Seismic Trap is getting buffed, but meh. Flamethrower Trap is a really good skill though. Flamethrower Trap is really, really good. So if you like Flamethrower Trap, take Chain Reaction. You also get increased AoE for your fire traps, and you get the trap trigger stuff, which isn't really that needed anymore. And then Explosive Expert has gained 10% multi to make up for the lost AoE. But this is big for Lightning Trap. So if you're a Lightning Trap player, you've gained basically unconditional blind all the time, more consistent regen. You've gained 5% more mana cost reduction, 5% more damage here. And then you take Explosive Expert because you don't care about this, and you've gained 10 crit multi. Lightning Trap, buffed. Looking good. Berserker. Berserker didn't see much changing. Basically, it's just a bit better. It got some more maximum range, and the Blitz thing is less punishing. You lose out on less crit. So Berserker's just a little bit better. Chieftain. Chieftain, I think, is actually one of the contenders for, like, the sleeper big winner. I've seen some salt over it. People don't like that they nerfed the... Well, they removed 2% regen from this node. But you traded 2% regen for 5% of Fizz taken as fire. It went from 10% to 15%. This is a insane buff. They also made the Totem Chieftain nodes a bit better. So if you want to play a Totem Chieftain, then that become a lot better. They've made some changes to Hierophant, which means that maybe you're not going to always play Hierophant whenever you want to play a Totem build. Chieftain's looking really solid. Deadeye, a lot changed with Deadeye. It lost a lot of just more damage, but nearly everything lost a bunch of more damage, and Fast Shot actually gives a lot of more damage, up to 60% more. I think this might be a good Toxic Rain Ascendancy with the Mirage Archer totem thing, the additional arrows. I think Gathering Winds and Wind Ward is really strong. If you can get dodge cap, you do like Wind Ward, Kintsugi, Wind Dancer. I think this is really solid. I think Deadeye is mostly going to be used for Toxic Rain builds, maybe some Ballista builds. You supplement your Ballista stuff with the Mirage Archers. The reason why I say Ballista builds is Ballistas scale exceptionally hard with additional projectiles, because you're adding additional projectiles to every Ballista. And this also has the projectile barrages have no spread. Anyone who played like explosive arrow totems, or if you've seen any of like Mathel's weird KB totem builds, the barrage thing can be like nutty single target damage. So I think this could be like a really high DPS option if you want to mess around with ballistas. So yeah, I think that's pretty solid. Pathfinder. Pathfinder got some really nice changes. Really, really nice changes. So the main thing they've done is they've separated this path. This used to be a 4-way path. It's now 2 2-pointers. The reason why that's really nice is you had a lot of poison and chaos builds which had to take all 4 points and either only wanted the end node or they only really wanted the first node. So this is basically just the poison node, and all the poison stuff is just condensed to 1 point. Really nice. And this is just like the generic chaos nodes. This is just 15% more chaos damage with attack skills and 30% AoE. But you're like, but Tarke, I play Corsair, I play Toxic Rain, we've lost 20% AoE. It doesn't really matter, because now you get Nature's Reprisal and Nature's Adrenaline really easy, no real thought process. And I would always trade 20% AoE for 15% more damage, and then the movement speed and attack speed. It's a really good trade. Master Surgeon now also has Recover 6% of life when you use a flask, which is insanely strong, like really, really good. Yeah, and you can stack this with Colossal Jewels, which have the same effect. So you can basically get like crazy healing, drop all your life flasks, run more utility flasks. Very strong. And they've just kind of like upped the numbers on the other stuff. Pathfinder was a big winner. Occultist. Hit-based Occultist is buffed, because now Withering Presence and Frigid Wake went from being dot specific at 20% to now 50% more cold damage. They've also just like separated the nodes a bit. They've buffed up Profane Bloom from a 25% to a 40% chance. So yeah, hit-based Occultist is looking buffed. Dot-based Occultist is looking about the same, really. You lost a little bit of damage. You've gained quality of life at map clear. Cold Dot Occultist, I think, is going to be one of the best builds for 3.13, by the way. Yeah, this is looking pretty solid. Spellcaster Hierophant. I think Hierophant's been buffed. There's been a lot of crying about Hierophant, which we'll come back to, but they've added Arcane Surge effect, 50%, which is a lot more damage, more cast speed, more mana regen. So you see the mana regen scaling, which is the really nice thing about it. It's just good. Conviction of Power having the guaranteed minimum endurance and power charge is really, really strong. I think Spellcaster Hierophant is looking tasty. Agnostic is slept on as a mechanic. Frostbolt Ice Saber could be a fun league start. I think that'd be a good build. Guardian. Guardian is basically the same, but like just everything went up a little bit in terms of the numbers. You lost some generic damage. You gained 5% attack, cast, and movement speed for allies, which is also very good for supports, and also really good for minion-based guardians. Most players would rather have 5% attack, cast, or movement speed than 30% increased generic damage, because you don't really need generic increased damage these days. Time of Need now has up to 80% reduced cast effects, which is very strong, and it's now every 4 seconds you get the heal instead of every 5. Harmony of Purpose, they've doubled the chance to generate power charges. Frenzy and Endurance, very strong. And then they just removed these a little bit. So yeah, Guardian's just looking a little bit better. Scion. Scion is definitely a big winner. I've seen some people complaining that like, oh, they've nerfed it. You know what they haven't nerfed? My spelling capabilities. Dyslexia, by the way. Oh, God. There we go. So, the ones that really stand out for me are Elementalist. Where is it? Here we go. So, you get the Shock Room hits always increase damage by 10%. You get the Cannot Take Reflected Elemental Damage. You get the Exposure, now lowers all resist by 20%. Very strong for just basically anything. 20% lower resistances is better than 10% pen. It's good for multi-ele builds. It's really good for dot-based builds because dot builds can't use pen. Having the reflect immune is always nice. The shock is good. Plus one golems. I don't like golems, but it's fine. But yeah, this is a big buff because it opens up elemental dot. So basically ignite. That's really strong. Raider now has the unconditional phasing as well. Still has movement speed, still has dodge, has onslaught generation and frenzy charge generation. Very strong. Pathfinder also has the recover % of life when you use a flask. But Tarke, it lost some generic elemental pen. Who cares? You get the healing, you still have the flask not using charges, you get the flask charge generation, you still have the moves, you still have the attack speed. The problem I always have with Scion, I think Ascendant would be a really popular Ascendancy if you could just take all 3 ranger options, because all 3 ranger options look amazing. Also worth mentioning, Deadeye. Deadeye has additional proj and tailwind, which is really good. Also has increased effective marks, which the mark stuff might actually also be pretty good on Deadeye. There's a lot of damage reduction you can get your hands on. And Assassin is worth talking about, because Assassin now has a chance to gain elusive on crit. So getting elusive on crit, getting power charge on crit, base crit chance, and then crit reflect immune. Really strong, just generically powerful. Yeah, it's solid. It's very solid. About the same, Gladiator. I've seen some whining over Gladiator because they lost some damage, but again, like, oh, we've lost 5% more bleed damage, Tarke. Whatever will I do? Have you ever played a bleed Gladiator? They're some of the highest, easiest damage builds in the entire game. They're still going to be absolutely fine. They've also buffed these nodes. These used to be with chance to block with shields. These are now just chance to block. This is something we've been crying for ever since the Gladiator got made. So that's a slight buff to puncture if you want to mess around with the block stuff. You nearly always just take gratuitous violence, arena challenger, outmatch, and outlast anyway. But yeah, Glad is basically unchanged. Going back to Saboteur, some mine-based sabs are about the same. Some mine-based sabs took a hit. Miners did lose the mana cost reduction. However, I don't think it's actually that big of a deal because it always annoyed me as someone who mostly played traps that miners have so many interesting mine clusters on the tree that just no one takes. There are loads of good clusters which reduce your mana cost. If you want mana cost reduction and mine damage, take the mine mana cost reduction passives. Screw you guys, you get cool clusters, traps get nothing, and you're like, but now we have to take the nodes that GGG made. Screw you, mines are still OP. The main thing really is most miners would go like Bomb Specialist, Pyromaniac, Born in the Shadows, they'd skip Demolition to take Explosive Expert. Losing on the AoE is a very big hit, because most mines are AoE based, specifically Toxic Rain mines. But yeah, mine builds are either about the same or nerfed, but mines are still some of the best builds in the game, so you're still absolutely fine. About the same, honestly, most Trickster builds. So the main thing that people have really cried about is losing the damage, but I've already explained why the damage reduction doesn't matter, because every Ascendancy has just lost generic damage. The thing which really hurts Trickster is losing the 10% spell dodge. Losing that 10% spell dodge is big, because again, you care about losing defense, you care about using utility, you don't care about losing out on damage. Ghost Stance has slightly more recovery. It went from 4% to 5% recovery. So that's actually kind of interesting. You lost some movement speed, which sucks. But a lot of Ascendancies just lost like random 10% movement speed. And you lost 1% attack and cast per Ghost Shroud, which isn't that big of a hit at all, to be honest. Trickster's still going to be fine. I think the biggest issue that Trickster has is they nerfed Contagion. And I don't think Essence Rain Contagion's going to look that hot for Echoes anyway. I mentioned that in my Echoes video. So yeah, I think the biggest hit to Trickster really is nerfing Contagion and then buffing all the Ranger-based Ascendancies for people who play Corsair, people who play Toxic Rain. I'd be very tempted to swap onto the Hype, which is buffed up Raider. Or buffed up Pathfinder. And I already played a lot of Pathfinder over Trickster anyway when it came to those builds. So yeah. But honestly, most builds are about the same, and also Weave the Arcane's got a bunch more stuff on there. So if you're like doing stuff doing like Swift Killer, Weave the Arcane, Patient Reaper, Prolonged Pain, like Might Ever Matter stuff, you might even be about the same if slightly buffed. Jug, they did something to Jug. It was the accuracy node is better, and that's basically it. Jug's about the same. If your build got better, great. Jug's still a perfectly fine Ascendancy. It's a bit boring, to be honest, compared to some of the other options. Chieftain's really great and fun. Berserker's got the fun stuff going on. Gladiator's got the Challenger charges. I still think Champion is really solid. I think Slayer's become a lot more interesting. Yeah, Jug is just a bit, nah. Necro, corpse-based Necro is about the same, so that's like Detonate Dead, Bolt, or Dead Cremation, all of which will be really good League start options. You haven't really lost much. You lost like a little bit of increased damage, but again, it doesn't matter because every Ascendancy lost a little bit of increased damage. So yeah, they're about the same. Dot-based Occultist, again, very slight damage nerf, but you've gained loads of quality of life, so really it's about the same, but we'll call it a slight nerf, but really it's about the same. Totem Hierophant. Okay, now this is probably the bit where people are going to get angry with me, because I think Totem Hierophant is actually fine. So the main thing they did is they removed the inbuilt multi-totem. Hierophant used to have inbuilt multi-totem, where they would summon 2 instead of 1. If multi-totem support didn't exist, this would be a insane nerf. Nearly dropped an F-bomb, but need that YouTube money. By removing that mandatory thing, you basically just use the support gem. And they've also done a great job to open up non-Hierophant totem-based ascendancies. Chieftain's looking great, Champion's looking great, Deadeye's looking great, Raider's looking great for more attack-based ones. I see a lot of Ballista builds, and it hurts you they go Hierophant instead of the others. So that's actually really nice they've done those changes, and now my nose is tickling. So, yeah, that's actually really solid. They've gained a bunch of other nice things elsewhere. They've gained some placement speed. Honestly, I think totem-based Hierophant will be fine. Nerfed. Let's go to Champion. So going back to Champion, they hit Master of Metal. Master of Metal is still a good node. It still gives you additional Impale, and it gives you flat damage on Impale. Ichimonji Champion, it's still going to be good, but it did get hit pretty hard. Still great, though. Assassin. So Assassin is still a good Ascendancy. It's got a lot of just generic increased damage. It's got a lot of defense from opportunistic 20% reduced damage taken while there are at least 2 rare or unique enemies nearby. Echoes is all about fighting multiple bosses at once. It's just 20% damage reduction. It still gives loads of damage. Elusive is still really strong, but they hit the mobility hard, and like hitting the mobility sucks because you feel that. Like, you could take a build and cut 30% more damage off it and the build will still function, and you might notice every now and again it does less damage, but it won't really affect how you play the build. Losing movement speed, that's something that will feel really jarring. So like if you would take the exact same build from now, next league, it will feel a lot worse losing that movement speed, but it's still a good Ascendancy. But yeah, that'll be very jarring to play. Sorry, guys. Elementalist, so golem based, like carrying golem, stone golem especially. So when they redid the golem line, you lost a bunch of golem damage. Like golems deal increased damage, quite a large amount, which is why it's worth noting. But then they also mentioned they're going to be specifically turning down stone and carrion damage. That double hit's going to be pretty severe. I do think flame golem should still be a solid build though, but it's worth mentioning they got nerfed. Toxic Rain Sab, I've already talked about why, but basically it just boils down to losing out on the AoE. It hurts losing that AoE. Yeah, it'll still be fine, but to be honest, maybe you might now look into doing some Pathfinder or some Deadeye or some Raider Toxic Rain Sab mine builds. Well, not Sab, but Toxic Rain mine builds. I actually spoke with Octavian a couple of times. I was trying to get him to play Ranger-based miners, because Ranger-based trappers are a thing. And Ranger-based, like, mine Pathfinders used to be a thing a while ago. And you see mine-based Scions. Basically, I think for that one particular build, you could still go Sab, but you might be tempted now to play it on a Ranger Ascendancy. And to be honest, it will still be a good build. Spell dodge tricksters. We've talked about it. It really hurts losing that 10% spell dodge. It's a lot of defense. It doesn't seem like that big, like 10% dodge, but it adds up. Still one of the best Ascendancies, though. And then minion duration-based Necromancers. So the reason why a lot of Necromancer players are crying is because of the Spectre Changes, and I do think the Spectre Changes are quite heavy-handed in terms of survivability. They've lowered the mana cost. I don't want to get into a massive debate about that. Spectres will still be good. It's mostly a case of the tier 0 Spectres will be the only Spectres you play now, and the lower ones, they became less valuable, which I don't like. I'd rather they just like nerfed all the OP Spectres and then brought the pool. Anyway, separate issue. But yeah, Mistress of Sacrifice, it used to be, if I remember correctly, 30 duration, 30 minion duration. It's now just 40 skill effect duration, which is a hit to SRS and it's a hit to Skellies. Skellies still do a lot of damage. It always sucks to see SRS nerfed, and also it makes me laugh because Rise always cries that every patch SRS gets nerfed. So I guess SRS got nerfed. The biggest loser overall, I would say, is the Assassin mobility. Losing that really hurts. I do still think Mistwalker's good. I still think Opportunistic is good. But there's a lot of movement speed, which just kind of went... Saying that, though, like, this still gives 50% increased elusive effect, and elusive gives movement speed. So it's still a mobile Ascendancy. It's just... it hurts. You know what I mean? Like... Still, like, it's still giving you zoom. It's still giving you a lot of zoom just from Mistwalker. But losing the, I think it was an extra 20% here. You know. I still think it's actually a perfectly solid Ascendancy, though. And then you'll probably notice I haven't mentioned Inquis. I don't know how to feel about Inquisitor. This whole Battle Mage thing, I'm not really sold on. I actually tried planning out a Scorching Ray and Quiz when I saw the Scorching Ray changes, because the Sanctuary path looks really interesting now that it gives regen to both life and energy shield. But the one thing that I don't like about this thing is there used to be a lot of like non-crit dot-based in Quiz, but they've kind of just got awkward. Like, they've got these points which are good. They get Augury of Penance, but then what do you take? Righteous Providence for the stats, I guess, and a little bit of crit chance for Elite Overload uptime. Like, you're not going to take Battle Mage. So for like non-crit in Quiz, I guess, yeah, they just take the stats. So that, like, it always sucks when you've got like just a whatever 4-pointer. Yeah, I kind of wish maybe these weren't connected, because Instruments of Zeal could be interesting in non-crit builds. I do really wish that it was like 2-point Virtue, 2-point Zeal. I think that would actually be really nice, and would open up a lot of builds. If it was like that, I would say that Quiz got a lot, but the fact that these are connected and these are kind of weird, yeah, not sure about that. If anyone from GG's watching, maybe split these two up. I don't know, but yeah. That's my summary on the Ascendancy changes. I have a League starter planned out. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you should be able to guess. Also, if you're angry with my takes or curious to see other people's takes, it's worth noting that yesterday I put out a tweet asking people what they thought, and it got like 40-odd replies. People talk about like what they liked, what they didn't like. I always find it interesting seeing how my points of view align or disalign with the player base. So it might be worth checking out if you're interested, but yes. I'm Tarke, have a good day. Also, massive shout out for all the support after yesterday's video. Really nice comments, and also had a bunch of people sign up on the Patreon. That was really kind of all of you, but yes. Have a good day. Bye-bye.